My friend, today we're going to be talking about the banjo fretboard. Let us unlock it for you. Previously, what we've talked about is just the foundations of music. Please bear with the camera. I don't have somebody in here playing follow the leader. I just can't figure out technology is moving with me. Hopefully, it captures what we're putting up. Yeah. When we did our previous boards, we were talking about trying to see it through the eyes of other instruments, whether it's your voice or we're trying to see the piano. What we're looking at is thinking about notes that have distances. Each time I explain this, we're talking about the foundations between notes and their relativity to others. These are called intervals. Each instrument has these, and technically they keep going until the instrument runs out of space. Now, in music, 7 notes. These are the foundations of all musical awesomeness. When we're talking about 1, our C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, and it just keeps going. The beauty of this is when you start seeing this as part of a system of notes that you could read, not only linear, like this as a piano, but you could also visualize them on a clef. If you go from middle C, which is otherwise known as C4, that is directly in the middle of the piano. Which means if you go over here to your nifty piano and you play one of these notes over here, you get directly in the middle. There's our C. Each one of these in the key of C major has no sharps and flats. So when we say C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, we can move all of these notes, stacking the notes with tertiary harmony. Simply meaning you do this with your hand, you play it, you get 3 notes, they just happen to be aligned. Where the spacings of the notes that I just aforementioned, moving on up, have these all arranged by having a whole step, which is called a major second, a whole step, which is a major second, or right here between E and F, it's a minor second. That's a semitone. Each scale has 2 of them. The one that came right before here was a minor second. Major second, minor second. F to G, major second, and then a major second. The reason why this works is because the setting up of these intervals allows us to see the magic of tetrachords. This one would give us simply our C, our D, our E, and our F, G, A, B, and then C again. Each time that we go above the middle line on any clef, you have the choice of either going up or down. I'm just going to throw it down here because it makes sense. And then every note above that goes down. That is a well-written clef. That allows us to see what this is in proximity to each other note. This is a whole step or a major second. So when we see this whole step or this major second, we can put it in terms of every scale that is not C still needs this. So when we're talking about every different instrument, we can see that every single instrument would have a diatonic scale that we could find. The interesting part is, can we see the notes that go in betwixt? Like this is what we would call a diatonic scale. And the diatonic scale keeps in these notes. And the reason why we call it diatonic, which is beautiful, the 2 notes that go and make a triad, tri meaning 3, have 2 notes that are what we would just laymanly call harmonies. So when you hear something like this, it is a harmony. It might not be pleasing. That happens to be called a major second, and that's a dissonance. Not the best, but when you put it with other notes, it starts to build character. That's the whole point of music, to cause tension and then release that tension. And if you could do it rhythmically and well, that is something to be said, you know, ta-da. So this is a diatonic scale. It's composed of our 7 notes. And what we want to start thinking of is in terms of not just diatonic scales, but thinking in terms of chromatic scales. So when we're playing these notes, if we had the same thing, but we weren't doing a diatonic scale, and we had a chromatic scale, we would include all the notes that were in between those. Now, you can do them on your hand. There's a really cool way to do the notes and their structure, but all in all, we're going to call them 12 tones. They're all minor seconds, which meaning if we look at it on a piano, it's much easier to visualize because it just goes up in fashion. We would have lots of notes there. But the idea is you don't play those all when you're trying to solo or do improvisation. You choose a couple, a handful that help to accent what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do over the app. So one of the things we can see here is when we're doing our chromatic scale, we put all of those notes back in that scale. So if we were going to say this out loud, we would not only have our C to D, but we would also have the note that's above it. Well, what note comes right above a C? Well, if we sharpen any note, it's a C sharp. The idea is we augment or go up in pitch. If we go up in tone, it raises. C goes up. But the next note is D. Well, if we were to flatten the note, we would call that note a flattened second. So we would have a flat 9, or we would call that a D flat. The whole idea about this is it is not only one, but it's both. C sharp is D flat. They share a character together. When you go to D sharp and then you go to E flat, they are the same note. This is our chromatic scale. Since there is no step between E and F, even on a piano, you will notice there are 3 black notes, and then there are 2 black notes. The whole contest behind seeing this is, can your eyes see that this note and this note does not have a note here, and then we start that same structure again, but then these notes have 3 in a row. That spells out what your signature is. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. This is our F sharp. This is our G flat. This is our G sharp, along with an A flat. A sharp is going to have a B flat. Having said this, you can also call B sharp. And B sharp absolutely is a C. If you wanted to call C a C flat and move back a half step, absolutely. C flat is definitely B. If we took F and did an F flat, that is definitely an E. And if we did an E sharp, that most definitely would be an F. I know it's very confusing, but chromatically, when we're naming these, you kind of want to, in a diatonic scale, use all 7 notes. I wouldn't say C, D, E, F, G, A, G7, C. You can. It's the same chord as a B diminished, but it's not said the same. So if you're trying to build chord characters with having more than just 3 notes, like a harmony here, a dyad, and then another harmony. Let's say we augmented that. It would be C, E, and then an augmented 5th. Will give us a chord that's known as an augmented triad. Major, diminished, minor, and then augmented. Pretty, huh? 1, major 3, sharp 5. This gives us our tritone feeling, and the whole idea is no matter where you play this, it's always going to give you that same type of built tension. The beauty about seeing this is you're actually looking at all of this while practicing just the boring scales on whatever instrument you're doing. So, without further ado, now that our foundation of music ideas is here, we can look at what we're going to be doing on our fretboard for the banjo in a whole new way. If you have used this series to take an instrument that you do know and you've never played the banjo before, you can tune a guitar to a banjo tuning. You can also get down on different instruments, tuning them to alternate things, and having fun seeing the different steps and how you learn an instrument. Is doing deep dives, I think, like this. So if you are watching this and you enjoy it, thank you for being here. We're going to take 2 seconds to write up what was our last one. So if you need to see this as well by going up, our last one was the ukulele fretboard. So I'm going to go up. If we had a C and we wanted to go here to this note, we can either call this a C, then a D flat, right? But then we would need a D right here. So the whole idea is you would probably have this in a different mindset. I wouldn't play this exactly as quarter notes just to get through here. I would set this up as being like this. C goes to C sharp. And since I moved the note, and the note is now between there, it's on a D, I'm going to do a D flat. There's a D right here. That D is going to go to same thing right here. Maybe we could go here and put it to this note. And D goes to here. That's going to be an E. So we need a D sharp. So we're going to put an E flat right here. Here's our E. Do you see how this works? So each time you go up here, you would still put the same note. And now that you've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you're still putting a value and a beat for 4/4, but you're expressing the notes in here as eighth notes. So you can feel and still go and hit all of those 12 chromatic notes. That's the whole point of trying to learn the notes in the side of a scale and realize, oh, if you start thinking diatonically, it's much easier to do this. So we're going to leave that up because it's just so pretty. I'm going to grab a black marker here, throw up 2 fretboards. What we were explaining last time was when you go through an entire fretboard, you are putting the chromatic scale so you can start visualizing your chords. Now, what I have here is a 4-string setup. A standard tuning for a banjo, which has a 5th string, it doesn't start until you get to the 5th. Here you would have the opportunity to have one more string, and from here, I just kind of don't play this idea down here, and I treat the banjo, a 5-string anyways, as if it's a tenor banjo, meaning you only have 4 strings. The string notations that we have, these are the names of them. When we have our 5-string, it's going to be the one that's closest to our face, that 5-string. That's why a banjo has 2 names. It's either called a tenor, which is this, or it's called a 5-string, which adds this 5th. When you've got this 5-string, and then the next string is the 4, the 3, the 2, and the 1, after the nut, what you have is this lowest note is the same as the highest. So both of these strings are going to be the D. Low D, and then we go up, hit them high them. When we go up here, the banjo basically is going D, E, F, G. It's going to tune itself up in a 4th, the same way that all stringed instruments, besides like the mandolin, the violin, the sanshin, a couple baklavaris, a couple different instruments like a hammer dulcimer, wood dulce, you could tune them to different things, but generally they're not just straight up going up 4ths. D would go all the way to G. This is our G string right here. We also have a high G, which is why it's interesting. I'll get to that later. And then here we have another B. Now the reason why this is interesting, when you have these notes set up, this spells out for you G, B, and D. And anybody that wants this channel is going to know that I'm going to go G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. This here is the key of G major. When we look at it on the clef, it has G. It also is going to go up and have a high G if we know that the top line of the treble clef is the F. We also have a B, which isn't as high as the G. So we're going to come down here, throw a B there. We've got a high D, and we have a low D. When we play this, we have now given ourselves the spelling of what the banjo is when we call it open G. Now there are other open tunings, and the reason why is because the strings move themselves around. You can have an open C, you can have an open D. I've even seen people changing their own tunings to their own alternate tuning, which is groovy. What I would suggest is say, find your favorite capo and get it. Mine is a Kaiser, and this was given to me. Daity, thank you. Roo Room, this is great. If you haven't checked out the Roo Room channel, please do. What I do is I keep it close at hand, if not on the headstock. And when I'm playing my banjo, if somebody's like, Q, D, rather than having to play open scale position chords or finger position chords or remember where triads are, you could just move a capo around and remember, okay, if I'm in G and I put a capo at the 2nd fret, I'm now not in G. I'm in G, G sharp, A. Ta-da! So when you learn one open tuning, you can move it around with a capo. That's what I would suggest in the first year or so. And then learn a bunch of rolls. Get yourself a teacher. Have fun. Let's go over the fretboard. Let's just visualize it. This is going to be the thing that you do at least 5, 10, 15 times.
If you play an instrument and you've never sat down with a pencil and pencil and paper, and written down your fretboard like this, and you can memorize your fretboard, great. This is just another way for other people. Here we go. When we do this, the banjo is a fretted instrument. On all fretted instrument, the first 5 frets are generally, the same length. And then they get slightly smaller all the way up to the 12th. First fret, second fret, third fret, fourth fret, 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret, 8th fret, 9th fret, 10th fret, 11th fret. And then at the 12th fret, we have a repetition of the open strings. So if we were going to do this, I guess I'm not a great artista. I'm sorry. When we do this, the G starts here. It's at the 5th. And then what I would suggest is seeing this as having our G and D, and then the B is the only one different. So once you do the D, they're both the same. So D goes to D sharp. When we do D sharp, we know that it's also E flat. So we're going to write D sharp, E flat. The next note, of course, is E. Since we know there is a half step in between here, we're going to go over to the F. But since the instrument's in the key of G, why not know that when you play G major, F sharp is the sharp that is added to the key of C to make it a 7-note system, a diatonic scale, that just possesses one augmentation. That augmentation is F goes to F sharp, and it's called G major or E minor. You could also call it a million different modes. You could call it C Lydian. You could call it, let's see here, D Mixolydian. Anyway, when going through these, I'm going to skip the F, but I'm going to put it there small. But what I want you to do is see, when you write in capital letter, you can see how each one of these move. Now, I could have done E is also called F flat, and F natural is called E sharp. But I don't want to confuse everybody. So when we do our F sharp, that naturally goes a half step to G. F sharp, G. G goes to G sharp or A flat. Then to A goes to A sharp or B flat. We have our B. B goes to C. There is no step in between this. This is our half step, our minor second, and our half step, minor second. Each time. Always half step. Does not matter. When we're talking about the key, we must account for what key are we in, because the intervals space themselves accordingly. Here's our C sharp and our D flat, and then here's our D, which starts over our whole thing. Now, mostly there are generally like a dot at the 3. There's generally like a dot at the 5, 7. And then I think on banjos, most of them are at 10. And then at 12, there's a double dot. So you can kind of see a spread or a layout. If you have a nice banjo, there might be some inlay or something on there. Very nice. When we're trying to do this, we can see that our G lines up here with our G. So they're in unison. Of course, when we play this next line, if we put our finger here, it's the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put same markings. All of these notes, at this point, if you lay your finger on both of these, they become the same note, like you've got a double playing. On our G, if we start from here, we have G sharp or A flat. So let's write that in. G sharp, A flat. Yeah. This one's going to be A. That goes to A sharp or the infamous B flat. Here's our B natch. Here's our C natch. Why is it a natural? They don't have sharps or flats. That's how we name things. Those naturals are called accidentals. That's how we kind of label things. When we're doing our C sharp and or our D flat, it goes to our D sharp, and our E flat. They are enharmonic equivalencies. They have the same name. When you play them, they have the same pitch. If I went from a C sharp to a D sharp, I could also name that a D flat to an E flat. The name I give it is pretty much contingent upon what key I'm playing in. This one goes to E, and then we have our half step to F, but remember, we want to say that we're in the key of F sharp, so we're going to put a itty bitty little F, and then look at this guy as being the note that's inside of our key. Again, when we get to the 12th fret, it repeats. When we go to the B line,
we can see that the D line's the same. We probably don't even have to write it out, but practice makes perfect, does it not? When we play B to C, that's our half step. C sharp, D flat, D. We've got our D sharp and E flat, and then E. Here's our F, F sharp, G, whiz, G sharp, A flat. Here's our A. Isn't it nice, folks? A sharp. What is it? Say it with me. B flat. And then goes back to our B. When we play our D, it's the same as this line, so you can ipso facto write it out really quick if you can. Done. All right, so when we're going through here, what I'd love you to look at first is how do you spell a chord? The one we're talking about today is G major, faux show. When we have a G, B, and a D, it's already in the open strumming here. So when you strum a banjo in an open strumming pattern, you get a G major. So that is one chord. The next thing I want you to see is if this instrument can be played with just an open strum, and you don't have to play anything, if you simply bar the entire second fret, that's going to be an A major, minus that G I just hit. When you treat it as a tenor, you get an A major, B major, C major, D major, so on and so forth. The thing that I'm trying to explain right here, which I'm trying to get most of my students are like, oh, well, that makes sense. When we see that a G, a B, and a D, and generally a pinky out here and a G, those are the same, kind of looks like this. It feels kind of wonderful for your fingers. You would have your first finger on the 3rd fret, your secondary finger is going to be on the 4th fret, and then your ring finger, when you go for your 1, 2, 3 here, is going to be on the 5th fret on the D, on that D string, the lowest one. And then you put your pinky on the high D, so you get 2 of the same notes. And then these 2 notes, they explain what the chord is. Now this is a G major. This G major is a 1-3-5, and it allows us to see that the triad that we were playing up here can be seen on our fretboard almost everywhere. So the real crux of this biscuit is, can you play G major right here in an open tuning, and then play the notes that have G, B, and D, and then find this all around the fretboard by simply moving a few of your fingers, and then finding it where it does repetitions. And since in music there are only, in a triad, a root position, then we have a first inversion where you take the middle note and it's on the bottom, and then a second inversion where you take the 5th and that's on the bottom. So when we play an open banjo in a G major, we have a 1-3-5. The lowest note we're playing is a D. Well, that is the 5th. G, A, B, C, D. So when you play an open chord on a banjo, this is a G second inversion. When we play the notes B, and then we put our finger down, and D, and then we play the note B, and then we play the lowest finger here on the D string to get a G note, this is a G major in root position. You'll see a lot of banjo players, whether they're playing claw hammer or they're doing rolls, right, using a 3-finger pattern, they'll be using this note and they sometimes drop it down to a transition chord by dropping the root down to the minor 7th. So what we kind of do is we learn where all the notes, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. When you put that along with chords like G major, you find the A, C, E, you move it up with the same shape because it's a minor, and you find the B, D, F sharp, the C, E, G, the D, F sharp, A. You start to see that the banjo unfolds itself in chords with the fretboard. It does take just a tiny minute to look at this through the eyes of the piano and then look at it through the eyes of the fretboard. And if you've never played a banjo before, it's not as hard as you would think it is. And let me show you a telltale method on how to do this really cool, fun awesomeness. The weirdest chord in every key is going to be the diminished, hands down. If we were to play in the key of G, it would be called F sharp diminished. We would play the notes of F sharp, A, and C.
If we play an F sharp here and an A here and a C here, we would have an F sharp up top. And this is an awkward thing to do, but if you can see yourself playing our first fret, second fret, and then skip the third and playing our fourth, we have a diminished. Now, a lot of people play a bar chord and put this down with their fingers stretched. I just have these tiny little shop type fingers, you know, good for making shoes. I don't think that I would play it that way. I would then take my F sharp, C, and then just bar this with my pinky. So generally I'll do something like this. I love that chord. Great diminished, and you can move it anywhere. All diminished chords, in fact, are movable because what we're looking at are 3 different shapes on the banjo. We're looking to play it open. When I showed you open, 2nd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 9th fret, kind of 11th fret, then 12th fret, what we were doing was showing the spacing of that whole tone scale. Or not whole tone scale, wrong terminology. Major scale, diatonic scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But not every chord in music is a major, 1, 3, 5. So the idea, watch me now, when we play the B note, that is the 3rd in the key of G. So when we flatten that B to a B flat, we achieve a minor chord. Now, it can't really constructively be done with an open unless you were to just hold the B flat here. But watch what happens when you play the G major in its root position. This is the 3rd. If I use this finger as a tiny bar, I get a G minor. Now, you can do this to every chord, but what I suggest is learn it from the major. Here's like an A major. Well, in the A major, move the B line. Well, here's the B line. Here's the D, here's the B, here's the G, here's the D. You're moving the 2nd string down a half step, but all the rest of these strings stay the same. If you play guitar, this chord looks like an A minor. Yeah? If you play ukulele, it looks like a D minor. So you already kind of know how to play a little bar chord. So on a guitar, it looks like an A, and on a uk, it looks like a D. Except here, you don't need to push your finger up so it doesn't hit the high E string. You just play the whole thing like like on a uk, you'd be playing like a B minor 7 or a D6. Or if you do it open, A minor 7 or a C6. So the whole concept of this is you can take this open major, move it here, and play just that minor note. I like to use one finger to cover both strings and then put a finger up top. But you don't have to. You can play it just like the A minor and put this finger up. It would feel like an A minor 6 on a guitar. On a guitar. On a uk, it would look like a D minor 6. But the idea is, you're simply just making a shape which you're already familiar with. Well, move that up a whole step, and you get the B minor. And then go to the 5th fret and bar it, because now it's a major again. So the idea is, whenever you see a major chord, you can play a bar across. Whenever you need a minor chord, you play the top note, you flatten it to the minor 3rd rather than the major 3rd, and then you either bar those or you play both of those notes together. Does that make sense? In a major scale, you've got a major, a minor, a minor. You've got a major, a major, a minor, and then a diminished. So when you're doing this, you start to see the pattern moving up and down the entire board. The only one that's awkward and diminished here, well, let's spell it. How do you spell an F sharp diminish? F sharp, A, and C. Honestly, here's a C, here's an F sharp, and here's an A. If you play what's looking like a triangle, put the top note up, you kind of see a pattern. When you take that pattern, you've got the top 2 notes here, and then you've got a note here that's forward, and then the bottom note. I know this seems awkward, but if you look at it this way, you've got major, minor, minor, major, major, minor. This last one we bar, put a finger down. See how the big bar goes here, and then we put our finger on that 3rd string. And then we play the 12th fret for the G as a resolution. The entire thing looks like this if we're just playing a little ditty and having fun. How about a little claw hammer? Here's G major, A minor, B minor, C major, B minor, D major, G major in an inversion, back to the D major, D dominant 7, back to G major and open. Little pull-offs and hammer-ons. Playing a G to a C. Hold the D. D sus. And then when we move this D sus, we can go up here and change this to a minor. Now we have an E minor. If we wanted to play the diminished chord, we could go up here, drop back to that F sharp, play our finger here. And remember, we had already learned F sharp, C, and then A and F sharp. And then meld right back into G major. And I know it might seem really advanced in the beginning, but the shapes are either bar chords or we have to put back a minor third. Here, when we're doing this last chord, the spelling of this last chord isn't going to be a 1-3-5. It's not going to be a 1 flat 3-5, which is what this looks like in contest. 1-3-5, 1 flat 3-5, 1 flat 3-5, giving you a minor third. Here it reverts back to the major third, but you don't have to think about that. You're just thinking about it's a flat bar chord going all the way up the neck. The interesting part is when you get this concept and you play on the banjo for a while, and then this one is a 1-3 and then sharp 5, which means it's the only note in all of major music that gets augmented to change the core structure of the triad. Da 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 da, festive pens, yeah. So this red and green thing, I don't know if you can see it. I barely can. I think it's festive. A student of mine gave me these, so I thought I'd use them. Why not? You betcha. So I'm just going to play that open G and show you how when you play the A minor here, you can move this A minor all the way up. Remember, all chords can be played in multiple different ways. So you could do cool stuff with different fingerings. Alright, so if you have multiple fingers to do stuff, it's easier. Earlier we were seeing this note. You can make different types of diminished chords and then resolutions, just like you can on any other instrument. So by drawing out the fretboard and starting to see that your chords are everywhere, what we do is we kind of get those chords going up the fretboard, or at least this is the way I teach the students, because it's really fun to go like G, C, G, C, G, why not try for a new chord? G, and then if you can try to pull the pinky off and still play the 3rd fret, you get your G7, which sounds great going into C. Absolutely, every single time. If you do that same thing-a-ding-ding and you take your C major and you flatten it to a C minor, it's a cool movement. So if you got a little time to play on the banjo, it is a fun must. This is an African instrument. It has a drum head and didn't have the 5th string until it was reinvented, I guess, in another facet, but it's always had like a gourd or a curved body. And the tenor banjo made its way to the Americas before this Civil War. Well, I would say revolutionary time, and then really turned into like an Appalachia type folk instrument, 1800s. Again, it was played by the aristocrats and the elite, and then it was repurposed in the after the turn of the century for different types of music, and now is kind of making another resurgence through folk and rock and roll too. So I think it's really great. If you've never checked out great banjo players, I suggest you do. Folks like Bela Fleck, I think, would be some of my favorite. But there are many, many fine banjo players. I myself, mediocre. I enjoy playing it. Let's put it that way. If I have the opportunity, I just had one last year to play on an album. I took it, and I showed them what I was able to do, and they were okay with that, and everything was wonderful. So the whole idea is there are many different ways to play it. when you have fretboard knowledge, I think it opens up doorways. So just as I was saying, if you learn how to play like a G major here and a G major here, you know how to play it two different ways. A way to look at this G major is these two fingers, if you were to move them and flippity flop them, meaning you just move them, I call them teeter-totters on my channel. If you just move them like this, right, back and forth, like you're up and down, teeter-totter, you start to get an appreciation for this sound, major, and then you've got this like kind of falling chord, and then it moves away. You're moving between two chords that shouldn't be kind of played together. One is a major structure, and one is a major to another that is outside of its family chords. So the whole idea is when you take this and you move this up a grouping and switch those fingers, you get your inversion. All we do is practice, right? So if you practice open, 3rd fret, 7th fret, 12th fret, you have all three of your inversions or all three of your positions for your major chord. Groovy? So when you do that, if you can do that with your A minor as well, you would view A minor, you'd be like, well, okay, if this is a G, and I know how to make a G major into a G minor, that must mean that this is A minor. And it is. And when you look at those notes, you would have A, C, E, A. Boomzo. When you go here and you have B, D, F sharp, B, B minor. Reverting back to the major that looks exactly like G major, you would take this major, move it up for the minor, minor, and then half step, major it up again. And guess what chord you get in the key of G? G, A, B, C. You betcha. So if you can play a C major right here, and you can play a C major right here, and you can move this up and you can find your C major right here, that means that the next technical C is up here, and you already learned it as being an open phrasing chord. See how easy it is to learn positions of where your root triads are? By far the easiest thing to do is learn musical theory through the eyes of a fretboard. The hardest thing to do is sit down for 5 minutes and go 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1. And as soon as you speed these up, they get a little bit faster. You could also use picks on your fingers, which is really fun, plectrum style. I prefer like a claw hammer, and usually when I'm laying down stuff on musics, I try to just stay tasty with the banjo. Give the feeling of the drum head with it. Try to do a percussive aspect to it, and then some fun bends and... sense for where you are on the instrument, it really starts to make sense in why you would want to have an understanding of where chords go, and then put together with a little theory. If we were just trying to see what a G major is, again, G, B, D, and the last thing I want to leave you on, because this is often a very hard thing to do, how to tune. If you play an open G and it feels a little funky, like something's not quite right, the idea is to try to hear your G. If you can hear your G and you can tune your G, you then can put your finger here on the 5th fret of the D string and then play the open G and hear that, right? Put your finger down on that string to hear, right, that B. So you've got your major third, not your minor third, major third, and if that sounds good, you put your finger down on the 3rd fret and you get your D. Well, if you do all these right, every one is the note above it. 5th fret on the D string is going to be your open string on the G. If you do that on the G string, play it, it's the open string on the 2 string, the D. Hear how I'm a little sharp on the G? So I'm just going to, just a tweak, just a tiny. Now I feel like I'm more in tune. And now I'm going to play that top string here, and I've got the D string, D, D sharp, right? Or E flat, E, E sharp, so this is an F, right? So when we're moving these notes, or not F, Look here, it's a D. What am I saying? It's a B. I was thinking. So when we're doing these, a little keynotes. If you're playing a G and you can move it down to an F, you can see how having a chord progression that's like G major, F major, C major, A minor could be wonderful practice. And if you already play the ukulele or you play the guitar, the banjo is not that hard to learn. The awkward part is the rolls, the strumming technique, the patterns that you would associate with the banjo itself. But if you're just looking to put the banjo in your repertoire, this is a great way to start seeing your fretboard as being something tangible. And if you can't see it, because I'm a dummy with the recorder, check it out. We talked about how a diatonic scale can also be considered a chromatic scale. Diatonically, why is it still getting so close? I feel like a Monty Python sit. I feel like it's going to be like... So, it goes through this whole process of seeing your scales. We know now that there is a half step between the third interval and the fourth. There also is between the seventh and the eighth, or the 7 and the 1. It's the same. It's just a higher octave. 1, 3, 5 is how we spell any chord. And if we're in the key of G, we just happen to spell it with the F sharp rather than the F natural. So whenever we look for key signatures or chords on how to spell things, we look at them by seeing tertiary harmony, and we try to decide whether it's inside the key. The chords that we use will always look the same. With this system, you could view it as a dash. You could view it as a line. A lot of people with the 1, 3, 5 like to view it in the dot system. Sometimes you view it as a diagram, like this. I would say if you're playing like the G and you wanted to do it at the 3rd fret, it would look like this. You would have your G, you would have your B, and your D, and G. If you are capable of doing this and writing them out like this, you will be really, really surprised at how quickly you could go to the next chord and say, cool, the next chord would be here. It's an A minor. We have our 4 strings and then our 5th down here. We have absolutely our B goes to a C. Our C is going to have this A and the E in here and the E. So our E up top, we have an E down below, and then the A. That's our A minor. And if you can start seeing it like that, your brain kind of gets rid of just the notes and the names because you know where they are now. And you kind of just start to see this like beep, beep, boop, boop. And then you see that everywhere. And that's also what the B minor is. It's also going to be the shape going all the way up that the E minor is. Boop. It's not the shape that the F sharp is, but the F sharp one takes that and puts it right here. So the one you have for the F sharp would kind of feel like this. You'd have a note right here, and then these two and this. A lot of people just bar this. A lot of people just bar this, but you can't because this, so you need to make a split. You start to see arrangements on where your fingers are, and if you're already playing an ukulele or a guitar or something, these are super, super easy to get. That's the same as this. Our 2 majors look the exact same going up the fretboard. And the only thing that we really didn't cover was how to not go up the fretboard and how to just kind of stay below. You would look at the fingers and the spacings and you would find them. You can use your G major, you can use your A minor, your B minor, your C major, your D major, your E minor. When we learn all of our inversions is where I'm getting at. You can play open G, A minor, B minor, C major, or you could take this C major and play it here. You could take that into a secondary finger and move it up a whole step and put a finger down or bar it. You get your D major, right? D major. If you go up and you flatten this and you get your minor shape, you would have an E minor. You could also play it right here. So either way, E minor or E minor. Our F sharp diminished, we could work this up. As I pointed out, my hands are itty bitty. Yuck. But that's pretty much all the chords that are in first position. So you can do G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, G, and never leave past the 5th fret. If you wanted to go in front, you would have G major. You could also move it to A minor back here to B minor, C major, D major, E minor, yuck, sorry, E minor, and then F sharp diminished, and then back to G. You never really need to leave the 3 to 7 area. After that, I would work up that G and maybe start your G here to A minor, then to B, and then here, half step, turn it into your C major. C major would go back to your D major, move it up for your minor because you're going to take this shape to an E minor, and then your F sharp diminished. You can choose to either double back here, or you can look here and build the chord out, finding your F sharp and your C this way. So if you have these two notes, there's your A and your F sharp. Well, at this point, you're going to need F sharp, C, and you're going to need A. So where are your other notes? Oh, looks like here and here. Well, that's an awful stretch. I wouldn't put my hands there. If nothing else, I would just play my A, F sharp, and A. Well, at that point, you could take this finger and put it down here on the C. And that would resolve to your G as well. You can do a backdoor resolution with an F, but that gets into a whole other layer and concept of theory. I hope you enjoyed this today. A good way to practice the practice of practice, if you're trying to do claw hammer, make a fisty fist, a shooter, and then just try to go down with your fingernails on the other 3 fingers, primarily your middle finger and your ring finger. Switch between chords. And what you'll find is you'll be playing some pretty cool songs that you've loved. And when you get a little faster, you might add some whirls in them, right? Like a, "Is that a rocket top down in Tennessee? Ain't no smoky smoke on rocket top. Ain't no telephone bill. Do love banjo, and in fact, if I never get any better than that, I just really enjoy doing songs that I've listened to a million times over and over. They never get old. Anywho, if you enjoyed this, and I hope you did, please subscribe. Put something cool in the comment section. Tell me what you're working on. Tell me if this members only series has helped you, and then if you are watching this after the fact and you're not a member and you found this helpful, why not become a member and support the channel? $1.99 a month. Anyway, my name is Wago Howard. Thank you very much. Have a great day.